Okay, so I've got this AutoCAD file open, and I wanted to just go through a process you can use to insert these drawings into Revit in a way that's going to make them useful to model over to create your Revit model, starting with a model of the existing, and then obviously later you'll want to put your designs into those. So here you can see we've got all these different drawings combined into one file, and that's a common thing you'll have in AutoCAD. So on the left here we've got the survey, and then on the right we've got the ground floor and first floor plans, and then above the elevation from the street and a section. I'll just point out a couple of things from the survey initially, because you may not have used one of these before. And so do you know what these numbers mean that are all over the drawing? So here, exactly. So do you know what sort of levels they are? Pretty much, that's right, yeah. So the AHD, which is Australian height datum, but yeah, it's very close to sea level. And so here you can see all these different values, which are, again, like I said, in metres. And so you can see there that on the street it's 36 metres, and then in the interior it's not much above that, it's a little bit above 36. And then going down to the rear, we can again find some interior levels. You can see here just a little bit below 36 metres. So it's fairly flat. And in a situation like this, you don't really need to then use the survey all that much to model the heights in Revit. And so often where you have a lot of variability in the levels, it can make sense to insert the survey into Revit and model your heights directly off these levels that you're given. And that is the process I use myself in every single design project I work on, because I want the levels to be accurate. But again, with a project like this, it's fairly flat, and so we can refer back to the survey as necessary, but I won't worry about inserting that into Revit. So I'm going to begin with the ground floor drawing. And so I've got Revit open already. Just going to go and maximise that and make a new file using the architectural template, as always. So if you've forgotten that, don't use the other templates. They'll get you into trouble. Always architectural. Okay, so while that's starting up, I'll switch back to AutoCAD. And then you can see, again, we've got this ground floor drawing, and what I'm going to do is make that into a separate file before I insert that into Revit. And that's probably the most important concept with what I'm going to show you initially, that you have separate files for each level that you want to work on. So here I'm going to select all of the things that I want in my new file. So remembering with AutoCAD you don't have to use Shift or anything like that usually to select multiple objects, you can just keep selecting them. So I've selected all the objects, and if you find that you do need to use Shift, it's an option in preferences you'll need to turn off. But normally you shouldn't need to use any option key, you can just make, in this case, crossing windows, so that's a window going right to left, which crosses over the things I want. So I'm just selecting the same objects again, and it will give me a message about duplicate selections in some cases, but in this case it's not coming up. Anyway, I know I've selected all the things I want. They're highlighted there. So now I'm going to use the shortcut W and then enter. W is the shortcut for W block. And so W block means right block. And this is one of the most important commands in AutoCAD actually, because you use this method to export objects into their own file. Right, so I'm just going to then use the Browse button down below and choose a new folder. And so, well, let's just call it Eastern Flair, and so I'll call this ground floor plan. and then save. So here I'm also going to choose an insertion point. So here you can see the button pick point, and I'm going to use the top left or the top right. No, use the bottom left corner as my insertion point, and then I'm going to make sure under objects I leave the retain option. Insert units, leave on or make sure it's on millimeters, and then click OK. So that will have made a new drawing file, and I'll just go and open that up so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so here you can see my new AutoCAD file, and I'm going to zoom right out so you can see the origin. And so with the W block option, you do have the option to pick an insertion point, but it's also got the origin in relation to the previous file. So that's something that will actually cause a problem in Revit, and I'm going to fix that. So in the AutoCAD file for the new ground floor, a better way of doing it actually is to just select those objects, use the move button, click onto that point that you want to use for insertion, and I'm going to turn the down the bottom dynamic input option. I want to turn off, but it's not there, so I'm going to go to here and find dynamic input in the list here. There it is. Okay, so dynamic input is the option that gives you the command prompt or the options next to your cursor. So you can see there it's asking me to specify a second point just near where my cursor is, and if I turn this option off down the bottom, which is dynamic input, that'll go away. What that'll also do is let me type in absolute coordinates. So I've typed 0, 0, it's gone in down on the command line, enter, and you can see it's gone back to the origin. So that's really important if you want to move things relative to your absolute origin rather than moving things relative. So if I hadn't turned that option off, by typing 0, 0, it would have moved 0 in each direction. In other words, it wouldn't have moved at all. Okay, so I'm going to save that file back into my original file. I'm going to now do the same thing with the first floor. So I'm going to select everything I want. Okay, so just making sure. I may as well take the north point since it's there. That'll be useful. And okay, so I've got all my objects selected. Again, W, enter, browse, and I'm going to type in my new name, first floor plan. And then this time I'm not going to worry about using pick point. I'm just going to leave that option since we're going to be setting the origin in a different way. That option is still useful if you want to insert the drawing into another AutoCAD file, but again, the way Revit works is a little bit different. So I'm going to leave that option this time and leave retain and also millimeters and just click OK. Again, I'm going to go to open now and open that file, first floor plan. And then again, zooming out, you can see that the origin here is down to the left. So I can select those objects, click move, click onto the bottom left corner, and then type 0, 0. So again, we've got the corner of the building sitting at the origin in AutoCAD. So I'll save that file again, and then I'll go back and turn dynamic input on again. It's useful to have that option most of the time. So again, when you are using different commands in AutoCAD, you see your coordinates come up next to the cursor. Okay, so I've got my two main files, the two floor plans. The elevations and the sections I'm going to leave for now. We might not even need to insert those because you'll find as you create things in Revit, you can have the AutoCAD file open and just check your heights by measuring in AutoCAD using the measure tool. So under utilities you have measure, make sure you know about that option so you're not drawing dimensions all the time. And there, for example, I can measure the height from the bottom of this column up to the floor level above, and see it's 4808, a bit over 4 metres. And that's often easier than inserting the whole drawing. Okay, so I've got my Revit file there ready to go, and what I'm going to do then, before anything in this ground floor view, is duplicate that view by right-clicking, duplicate, and then duplicate view, and then just duplicate. And then I'd insert. I'm just going to use Import CAD. If you're working with an AutoCAD file that you plan on updating, you should use Link CAD. But because it's an existing drawing that shouldn't change, I'll use Import CAD. Then I'm going to go to find my file. Okay, so looking down at the options below. On the left is probably the most important one. When you're inserting a 2D AutoCAD file, I would say just use this option every time. Current view only. Okay, because since it's a 2D AutoCAD file, we don't want that showing up in 3D views or in elevations or sections where it will just appear like a flat line getting in the way of everything else. So it's a floor plate, and it's important that it shows up just in the view that I'm creating for this, specifically for this drawing. So current view only, really important. And then the import units, you usually can leave that on auto-detect. Autodesk programs are pretty good at working out the units of other programs in their suite, but if you know the units, why not choose it? Millimetres, not centimetres. Colours is up to you, but I usually like to leave it on either preserve or black and white. In this case, I think preserve. Let's just have a quick look at the colours again actually. So blue and magenta, they're going to be fairly easy colours to see on the screen, but maybe the cyan and the other lighter colours won't be, so I think I'll actually use black and white there for the colours. And then the positioning. So remember, I've set the origin in AutoCAD, and so there I'm going to choose Auto Origin to Origin, which will align the origin in Revit, or align this drawing with the origin in Revit. So I'm going to click Open, and so there's the origin in the middle where my cursor is, and so the bottom left corner of the building should pop up right there. So if Revit doesn't go away, there it is. Okay, so you can see there, that's the origin. Now, you might prefer to place things manually. That can also make sense. But if you're going to do that, you'd then have to align things manually as well. In this situation, because I've used that common origin point, I don't have to do that. But I do need to adjust my views. So notice that these elevation views are set up based on the centre, or the origin being the centre of your building. But it's not the centre of this building. And so I'm going to select these elevations just by selecting with a window, going left to right, and then using either the arrows on the keyboard, or you can just click and drag, move that across. If you're wondering why I'm selecting it with a window rather than just clicking onto it, it's because there are two objects there. You have the elevation symbol, but then the arrowhead is actually where you select the view itself. And with that line there, you can see where the elevation view is coming from. So if I just drag this symbol across, it would have left the line cutting through our building over here in the middle, and it would have been more like a section. Okay, so I just try to force myself to always use windows to select those, at least initially. You might want to move the elevation location separately later, but at first it's much easier just to move them together. So again, just selecting with the window and then clicking and dragging to place them. you probably won't need to show anyone else the other elevation views apart from this one over on the right, because the building is bounded by other buildings, and so there are adjoining buildings north and south, and then to the rear, actually you might show the Eliza Street elevation, possibly, that part of the building there that comes out on Eliza Street. But otherwise these definitely the the west elevation and the north elevation probably won't be necessary, but they're useful to have as working views in Revit, so it's good to set them up. Of course the section you'll need, so I'm going to again just select that and then click and drag to move that to a more sensible location. And while I'm at it, may as well extend it out so that it goes all the way through the building. Okay, so I'm just trying to get you thinking about the general process in Revit, remembering it's a 3D program, so you need to think about how the project or the building is going to be viewed in 3D and set up those views from the beginning. So I'll just save this file. I'll go too far. So you might have noticed I've saved this as Eastern Flair existing. If you need to have, do you need to show existing drawings? You probably don't. But it's still not a bad idea to model up the existing space before putting your design in. And that will be definitely the process you follow when you work on your design projects. And it's an important thing to document what's already there and work out what needs to be changed to accommodate your design. So I've got the ground floor set up, and notice it's still called ground floor copy 1, so I'll rename that now just by right clicking on that view name and call it ground floor with DWG, which is AutoCAD drawing file. And then I'm simply going to repeat the process with level 1, so I'll duplicate that view, and then I'll import CAD again, choose my new first floor plan, and leave all of these options the same, except you can see that the positioning has gone back to centre, so I want that to be on auto origin to origin, but all the other settings have been retained there. So I'll click open, and did I not save that one? Oh no, sorry, that's right, because I've moved the views, sorry. Okay, so that's correct. Now I know it's correct, and I'll rename this view accordingly. It's still a good idea though to make sure before you go into a lot of work, and you want to ensure that things are going to line up. So I'll begin with some reference planes. You don't have to put reference planes in before you start making walls, but for the main dimensions I think it's still a really good idea. So you're working on an interior design, so the interior dimensions for you are the critical measurements. So I'm going to pick the interior face of this wall and then just extend the length of that reference plane out so that it's easy for me to see it and select it later on. And again I'll stretch this one out after I've created it, and I'll get the other one on the bottom corner here. And maybe I'll just go right ahead and put in the other main walls. So don't go overboard with your reference planes. You don't want them in there for every wall, but use them for the main things. And columns might be another one, but we'll look at using a column grid for that instead maybe. And stairs as well, you might also want to use some reference planes. So you can see those pretty clearly hopefully. And actually maybe one other really important one would be the angle there, and so that's a bit of a tricky one because you've got the shop front, but we've got this part of the wall here which might give us a good baseline. Okay, so if I go to look at my level 1 plan, you can see that the reference planes project through and line up exactly with this floor plan. That wall probably changes thickness, so that's okay if it doesn't line up, but otherwise they all line up pretty well. And that's essential. If the floor plans don't line up, there's no point modelling over them. So the next thing would be, before you model anything, usually, the next thing you might want to think about is the heights. So here I've got the section, like I said before. You probably don't need to insert it, you can just measure the heights from it. So again, using the measure option, if you don't remember, from that bottom of that column up to the floor on the level above, it's 4040, isn't it? 4080, sorry. So I'm going to go to the south elevation, and notice I can already see some of those reference planes, which is useful. If you're wondering why we don't see all of them, it's because the view isn't big enough. Or actually, sorry, no, it is. It's actually the angle of this reference plane. So I'll show you a little trick there. I'm going to draw a reference plane from the intersection here and make it vertical. And I'll draw another one from the intersection above. Okay, and then in the south elevation, I can see them. Okay, it won't show you reference planes that are at an angle to your view, but there I can then see, even without any walls drawn, how wide that building is. So I can select one of those levels and drag all the way across. So it's a good idea to make the levels bigger than your space from the beginning. And now set the height here, so this one should be 4080. It's only a 2-storey building, so these are the only building story levels we need. But you also have a ceiling and a parapet above, so it would be good to have levels for those. So for now, I'll just start with a level for the ceiling. So again, just by measuring from this floor up to ceiling height above. So 3890. Let us draw a level roughly across and then change the dimension between those levels, which will give me an overall height of 7970. So I'll rename that and make it level 1 ceiling. Yes, to rename corresponding views. Okay, so then you can see that the reference planes don't go all the way through to this level. So if I go into that floor plan, we don't see anything. So again, just carrying through what I showed you before, I can select these reference planes and stretch them so that they do go through and cut that level. And I'll check the other views, just to again get you thinking about how this project works in 3D. So in my east elevation, you can see again that the levels aren't in a very good position, so I'll just stretch those across. And again, extend the reference planes. In the north elevation, most of the work's going to be done already, because in the south elevation I'd already stretched those reference planes. Still good to check though. The west elevation as well, most of the work's done, because again I've done it in the east elevation already. Just the section there could maybe be extended, so I'll stretch that up and again extend that view. So I'll open the section view as well. You can see then it's not too bad, but if I disable cropping, you can see there this rectangle around the view is the cropping region. So I'm going to disable cropping and then zoom out and see if I can find those other reference planes. They should be there. So I'm going to turn off the cropping region. Just going to select that one and just get my bearings. Oh no, sorry, that's right. I moved my section view up. So that's right. So this is the plane on the left. That's correct. And then we have the other planes on the right. But again, need to extend that view So back into section. So we should see two planes on the right. What's going on there? Oh yeah, so again this plane's below the section line, so that's right. So we've just got the plane above and this one on the left, so that's correct. And so there I'll turn cropping on again, just so you know. I'll bring this across so you can see what it's doing. If cropping's disabled, even though I can see the cropping region, it's not actually cropping anything. So when I turn that on, it will crop again, and I want that to be at least big enough for the things showing in that section. So I'll turn cropping on again. And the levels, if you like, you can bring those inside the cropping region. Does that make them a bit easier to work with in a section view? And so very last thing, I'll just draw a few walls in now to get you started with that, and then I'll give you some time to work on this. So I'm going to again measure, this time in Revit. So just using the measuring tool up here to work out the size of this wall, which you can see is 270. So with the wall tool, I want to make a 270 wall, but I'm not going to use the double brick wall there. It probably is a double brick wall in reality, but because it's an existing wall, you don't need to show the construction. You don't want to show, well usually, you don't want to show the cavity in an existing wall, and you definitely would not want to show the material on the outside of this wall, which is set to be brickwork at the moment. So I'm not going to use that wall. That's a really common mistake people make, using a wall that's too complex. I'm going to go to generic 200mm, and then edit type, duplicate, and call it existing 270mm. Then I'll edit the structure, and I'm simply going to change the one component we have there to thickness of 270. And I'll leave the material. Notice it's on finish. It's good to just make note of that. That finished material is really useful for things that don't have a specified material. And so I'll just click OK, and then can trace. So I'm going to set the height as well though before I choose anything. So I'm going to set the height to level 1 ceiling for now, and then location line to finish face interior, remembering we've made the reference planes using that baseline. So I'm just going to then click and trace all the way around. Now here, like I said, this wall is a different width, but I'll do it that width for now, and I can easily come back and change that afterwards. Okay, so notice it should snap to your AutoCAD lines exactly. And there are all sorts of tricks like picking lines and things like that, but tracing doesn't take very long. Okay, so you can see now that I've got the wall there projecting a little bit too far on this plan, but I can't see the AutoCAD lines underneath it anymore. So a couple of options there to make this slightly more workable. On the view control bar, I'm going to go to wireframe, which will make things see-through, but things that are being cut will show with the coarse pattern. So to disable that, I've got to change the graphics or the detail level to fine as well. So now I can see the AutoCAD line work underneath. So I'll measure that. So you can see it's 240, that wall. I'm going to select this wall. Oops, main wall, edit type, duplicate, and this one will be, sure you would have guessed, existing, exactly, 240mm wall. And then the thickness there, of course, I'll change to 240, so that now lines up. Right, so even though you have a glass opening that runs all the way across there, in reality there would be, if you look at the section, sorry, Okay, so there'd be a section of wall above the glass. So we need to cut the hole out of the glass, so the hole out of the wall, to then place the glass in afterwards, which we'll do later. So, very last thing, just check that wall on the next level. Go to level 1, and you can see the wall there coming through. So you can just follow that process to add in the remaining walls of the interior, and decide whether they need to go through to the ceiling level or just to level 1. Make sure you measure the walls in advance and make a wall type for each different wall thickness. So this wall you can see is 150. So you can easily make a new wall type with that thickness, and it would, I'm fairly sure, only go to level 1. So it would stop before this first floor. Okay, so let's quickly show you that in 3D. And so it shouldn't take you long to build up an existing model, and that should give you something to add your design to.